Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews. So this is not going to be a movie review. This is something that I really just need to talk about. Sometimes there are events that go on in the world that I really just need to use my voice, and this is one of those times. I will be back tomorrow and Thursday with normal horror movie reviews, but this ain't that. Not right now. So I actually had a comment from a regular subscriber and viewer that was mentioning that they were very much looking forward to my input and voice in the recent decision of overturning Roe versus Wade in the United States Supreme Court. And I'm disheartened, not by the statement from the subscriber, but by the situation overall. And I kind of wanted to just talk about it for a little bit and not necessarily just, hammer anybody with my views. But while I have a voice, I think it's my responsibility to at least use it. And if, folks don't like it, if you're not, tuning into this channel for any kind of political opinion, I get it. I understand. That's perfectly fine. But this is an opportunity that I'm going to take. So I could give a lot of reasons why I believe that abortion should be legal, why I believe it is fundamental health care and why health care is a fundamental human right. And I'm going to touch on some of those, but I thought that I would actually approach this in a slightly different manner because it's such a wedge issue. It is the wedge issue that I'm really not going to be changing anybody's mind that are firmly in the camp of abortion is murder and, baby killers, things like that. It's too ingrained. If that's you, then please don't turn away quite yet. Downvote, this video if you want. I get it. But I want to talk about something slightly different. And that thing I want to talk about is why, even if you oppose abortion on a moral standpoint, you should be enraged and completely against this recent development. So really what I kind of want to discuss is the foundation of our country. We have a lot of structure in place with the Bill of Rights, with the Constitution, and there's a certain amount of there's a great deal of structure involved there that allows us to operate within certain parameters. There's a lot of rules in place, and there's a lot of flexibility in place too. Our country's foundational documents are quite malleable. That's why we have amendments to the Constitution. It's because things needed to change over time, and the process in which to make amendments is extraordinarily difficult, purposefully. It needs to be difficult. It needs to have an overwhelming support of the majority in order to actually fundamentally change this very sacred document. But the methods are in place, and those methods are part of that structural element. We have the ability to alter our foundational elements within the confines of our foundational elements. And I think that that's an extremely awesome thing. It's what makes America so great. And, the idea that we have these principles and we have these values and we have this structure in place that allows us the opportunity to both adhere to traditions, to adhere to, rigid structure of our, democratic capitalist, representative of the people system, while at the same time updating it and changing things as necessary with the times. And in that structure, we have our three branches of government. This is basic civics. We have judicial, executive, and legislative. And in the structure of those three, we have checks and balances. It makes it so that no one individual or one political party or one branch of the government has total power. The one thing that we really wanted to do more than anything else was make sure that we were on an even playing field, that every person in the United States had an equal voice in the development and life of their citizenry. So it's a representative democracy. It's, we all have a voice, and we elect our representatives to go to, Washington and speak on behalf of us, the representative part of things. The real danger comes into play when the structure starts to get weakened, when the foundational pillars that hold up the building that is our country start getting whacked at with sledgehammers. And that's what's happening here. And that's why you should oppose this. If you wanted to make abortion illegal across the board or hand it over to states' rights and have there are methods in place. There are proper methods in place within those constructs, within those structural elements that allows that to happen. Codifying law that makes it illegal on a federal level and passes down to states, could have happened. Not easily. I mean, whether it could have in societal framework of where we exist today, with the people's voice and opinion, probably not. But the fact that it's tough, the fact that those rules that allow that malleability makes it more difficult for the really big things to be added or changed or revised purposefully, that's why it's difficult. It's if it's a big thing, if it affects everybody, if it doesn't have overwhelming opinion, and support, maybe there's something telling there. There's the ability to add an amendment to the Constitution, making it illegal on a federal level, and then handing it over to states. That would be even more difficult. But the procedures are there. The ability to do it is baked into the framework of our country. And that's why it's necessary. That's why it's difficult. The fact that it is big, it makes it... And that didn't happen. The framework, the foundation, was circumvented. And this has been happening more and more. And the thing of it is, it has been praised and rallied and championed. And everybody seems to be kind of losing the forest for the trees with this. I personally, if I was watching a sports game, if I really supported my team and so forth, but then they just started completely changing the rules mid-game on the field. It was a soccer game and they started changing the goal that they're defending, to 1 foot wide, and they're making the opponent's, goal 40 feet wide and saying that if we score a point, it's, actually worth 10 points. If you score a point, it's only worth half a point. And they're bribing the referees to look the other way while they're kneecapping their opponents. If that was happening on the field, I don't know that I do know I could not support it. I would walk off the field in disgust. I couldn't support a team that circumvented the rules, that changed things on the fly, that threatened to destroy the very fabric that makes the game or society what it is. And that's been happening more and more, and it seems to just be met with nothing but continued rallying, because a lot of people think that the ends justify the means. And in my opinion, that can't happen. I don't care if it is something that I support. If the means are unethical and threaten the foundational framework of our country, I can't support it. If somebody wants to burn down a city because the corner deli doesn't serve their, roast beef the way they like, I can't support it, even if I agree with them about the roast beef. The methodology can't excuse, the outcome can't excuse the improper methodology. It comes down to, I had a friend, we were having an argument about the ends justifying the means, and he said, well, what about, something like, what if the ends were something really big, like solving world hunger? And I brought it up to him, was like, well, you could solve world hunger easily by killing, 99% of the population. Then all of a sudden the food to people ratio is, extraordinarily, or even just say, 50%, we'll go Thanos on it, go 50%. Did the ends justify the means? I would say no. I would say that it's, maybe worth looking into other options, the more difficult options, the more roll up our sleeve options, and see if we can really address this without actually harming people, without actually harming our country. The checks and balances of our country are completely skewed, and there's a number of reasons for that at this point. We have senates that aren't representing their constituents. The structure needs to be changed in that regard. When we have 2 senators per state and they are making massive decisions on our behalf as a representative force of the people, And we have 879,000 people in South Dakota and 39.35 million people in California. That means that everybody in South Dakota, well, everybody in California has 2.23% of the same voting voice as one entire whole person in South Dakota. The population shift and the way that states are now, being filled up are not represented any longer by the 2 senators per state rule. Plus, we have a situation where we have primarily 2 parties, which is extremely unfortunate, and that needs to change. But we have one party that is, by and large, not always, but by and large, voting within their conscience. Usually within the framework of their party, sure, but a lot of times, if something comes across their desk and, Democratic, higher ups, the DNC and so forth, support it, but they recognize it's not the best thing for their constituents in their state and they can't morally side by it, they will vote no. We have people voting their conscience, not their party line. On the other hand, we have the other side, the Republicans, voting entirely party line. 100% across the board, forget conscience. And if we have one side that's actually voting conscience and what their constituents are represented and so forth, and they'll vote yes or no based on that, but one is strictly party line, that completely changes the framework. The checks and balances are thrown off. The 2-party system, that's why it's broken, is largely because of the one that votes nothing but party line, even if it hurts their constituents, even if it hurts the people that they are representing. We've had Republicans that have argued against their own written laws simply because the other side said, hey, you know what? Actually, that's a good point. We're going to vote with you on that. And it's like, whoa. We don't want your support. We're now going to vote against our own laws simply because the other side says, not a bad idea. How is that, in all honesty, representing the voice of the people? We have gerrymandering that are making absolutely certain that no matter what the population looks like, it's not going to be represented. The majority of people in an area are no longer going to be represented as the majority in their voice in Washington through gerrymandered districts. We have no consistent application and adherence to established rules, which is one of the big reasons we got to where we are today with this Roe versus Wade thing. This is one of the elements of that person that is sledgehammering the foundational pillars of our country, is when we have a Supreme Court justice that it was, held off with Merrick Garland under Obama's watch for as long as possible because it was in an election year, according to Mitch McConnell. So we waited and waited and waited and waited until the next president was elected. And then we got movement. But then that same law didn't apply. That same rule wasn't applied consistently because the next time we were up in an election year and we had a seat available, immediate. Almost as fast as a Supreme Court justice has ever been put on the bench, the rules were no longer consistent. They no longer applied. The foundational pillars of our country are being smacked at with the sledgehammer, and they are weakening. On the judicial side of thing, the biggest reason that I can think of that even if you support abortion, or rather, sorry, I'm not going to edit this. I'm not going to make any cuts. The biggest reason you should decry this action, even if you support the making abortion illegal, is because precedent is sacrosanct. In the judicial world, precedent matters a whole lot. We call upon past cases and say, well, that was judged that way, so we have precedent. It makes it so that we don't have to pick apart every single little tiny technical aspect of every single little tiny case. We have precedent. You can't submit that. That's been ruled precedent. Precedent is an incredibly important part of our judicial system. And the highest court in our land has basically said it no longer matters. That if we want to change it on a whim, we can. With no consequences, with no forethought, with barely even any reason. And that's extremely concerning. And that should concern everybody, even if you support the making abortion illegal. That is one of the biggest sledgehammer blows that our country has ever faced and will ever face. The ramifications of this are going to be far-reaching and wide and catastrophic, and that is why it should be opposed. So many other things are now on the docket. And here's the thing is, you may support making all these other things illegal. Interracial marriage, same-sex marriage. You may say, my religion says that that's no good, so I want it illegal for everybody, which first of all, fuck you on that. Second of all, that's just dangerous. It's dangerous to have one branch of the government that wasn't elected, that is a lifetime appointment, wielding that much power. Checks and balances are completely thrown off. And here's the real shit part. People don't often consider that we don't give power to an individual. We give power to a chair, and somebody else may be sitting in that chair 10 years from now. If this is the way that you think that the game should be played, wait until somebody that you don't support is sitting there. And all of a sudden, this door that you opened for them 10 years prior is wide open for whatever the fuck they want. We need to be extremely careful about how much power we give to any given chair, because anybody could be sitting there. So that is the biggest reason that I would say, even if you support the making abortion illegal, you should be decrying this action. You should be protesting along with everybody else and saying, I don't care if this is ultimately what I want in this moment. The methodology in which that was employed is abhorrent, is dangerous, and breaks the foundation of our country. It needs to be fixed. This action needs to be reversed, and we need to apply some real strong band-aids to make sure that it never happens again, because this is dangerous. This is quite potentially, and without hyperbole, the beginning of the end. And that should scare everybody. I don't care what moralistic stance you take on this particular topic. This should scare the shit out of you. So, with that being said, now I'm going to go into my stance on abortion and why I think that it should be legal. First of all, I think the biggest thing is I think that it's just necessary health care. And I think that health care is a human right. Abortion is not just terminating unplanned pregnancies. There are many, many applications in which planned pregnancies are needing this procedure. We have ectopic pregnancies. We have septic pregnancies. Pregnancy as a biological condition is extraordinarily difficult, extremely complex. A lot can go wrong, and a lot does go wrong. Miscarriages in which the woman is not able to pass the fetus and needs medical intervention. Otherwise, the woman could die. All sorts of conditions, even in planned pregnancies. Married 5 years together, 2 kids previously, starting the nuclear family, good old white Republican family. They will, at some point, potentially need an abortion for a planned pregnancy. It needs to be available to them. And you may be saying, well, we didn't make it illegal. We just kicked it over to states' rights. Well, first of all, fuck you on that. I really should have gotten something to drink before doing this, but I'm not cutting it. The fact is, if you make it so that people can travel and get, the procedures that they need on a medical level, then you're only punishing the people that can't travel, which is largely the low income and people of color, urban areas and so forth that are not able to find the means in which to travel. Not to mention some states are considering, like Texas, making it a civil liability to still go out of state, or even a criminal liability is on the docket to go out of state and get the procedure done and come back. They could be found criminally, liable for it, which is just terrible. So kicking it over to states is not an excuse, I guess, is what some people are using it as justification. States' rights does not apply, in my opinion, to basic human rights. And this is a basic human right. This is healthcare. And even on the unplanned pregnancies portion of this, it still comes down to health. This is going to get a lot of women killed. There are going to be scores of people dead as a result of this ruling. You cannot stop abortion. You can only stop safe abortion. It will still happen. Our war on drugs did not stop drugs. On the grander scale across the entire society and so forth of our country, 18 years down the line is going to have a huge impact from this, because we're going to see a massive influx of crime statistics. This is what has happened in the past. We already have the numbers to show that this has happened, and that making abortion accessible and legal helped down the line. 15, 16, 18, 20 years down the line had massive impact in benefiting overall society, is having this option available. And speaking of options, I think that that's an incredibly important part of this. One of the biggest non-medical factors of death in pregnant women is femicide. It's being killed, murdered. I found out just recently, a couple of years back, that my father had, I knew that he had a prior marriage, and he has, 2 kids from there, my half-brother and my half-sister. But what I didn't know is that apparently the police were eyeballing my dad to find out if his wife would actually have her child, because he threw her down a flight of stairs. If the baby had been, had not been able to be born, had medical complications and so forth that caused the loss of, the child, then he would have been tried for murder. So they were keeping an eye on things. This happens. It's extremely unfortunate. It is an absolute soul on the stain of humanity, but it has happened. And it currently happens in a society in which, prior to a couple days ago, they did have choices. What happens if those choices are taken away? It's worth thinking about. Not to mention, this results in a higher rate of abortion overall. The numbers are there. The statistics are there. We have a snapshot of our country prior to making abortion legal and during making abortion legal. And the numbers go down. And that's where this really comes into play is, are we talking about fixing the problems or punishing people, punishing women, punishing poverty class and people of color? Because it kind of seems like it's all the latter. If you think that abortion is murder, is killing babies, then the best way to go about it is to lessen those numbers. Make it so that it's not happening. Making it illegal makes it happen more and makes it unsafe. You are counterproductive in this endeavor. And if you're wanting to say, it's not about race and so forth, and it's not targeting people of color, we just had a representative from Illinois, Mary E. Miller, Congresswoman, proclaiming it as a victory for white life. When they tell you who they are, believe them. This is absolutely about punishing women. This is about controlling women. This is about punishing people of color. This is about punishing the poverty class. This is about punishing urban areas. This is not about saving babies. If it was, then the focus would not be on making abortion illegal. It would be on proper, fundamental education of sexual biology in our classrooms and making easy access to contraception and birth control methods possible. We would stop the problem before it starts. We would lessen the numbers. We would approach this with honesty, with compassion, and with civility. And we certainly would not sacrifice the foundational elements of our country to get around the rules, to get around the structure that was put in place to make things malleable, sacrificing our nation as a result. That is why I'm upset. That is why people are protesting in the streets. And that is why, even if you support making abortion illegal, you should be joining them. So, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back tomorrow with a horror movie review back on track. So thank you, everybody. And please take care of each other however best you can. We all need it right now. Take care.